Hello, dear friends. We are going to talk in this show about this conflict in Middle East, how this is going to influence the outcome, the architecture of the relations of power worldwide. And I am pleased to have as guest today Mr. Pierre Tonna from Malta. Hello, Mr. Tonna.
Hello.
And also Alexander Markovics from Austria. Hello, Alex.
Good evening, Marvin.
So I'm going to say a few words about you. Pierre, you are the president of European Geopolitical Multipolarity Alliance, in short, EGMA, and also you are political analyst. And you are very used with the analysis of what is happening in the world in the international stage. And I want to ask you to say a few words about you and about your activity.
So, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Marvin. It is my pleasure to have this discussion with you. As you know, I was always keen on what is going on around me, not only in my country or in the European region, but also elsewhere worldwide. To tell you the truth, I am not involved at all in any politics. And reason being, it is very simple, because I am not a politician. I stay out of the shell, and I look at politics from the outer side. So what I will discuss with you today is what I always preach. And the reason why I have formed up this alliance, so-called EGMA, it is the only reason that us people who are members in EGMA, we all think the same way. We all analyze with the same way, and we all want the best for the future of our nations and our neighbors.
Great. So I have the pleasure to announce that myself, I'm member in EGMA, European Geopolitical Alliance of Multipolarity, and also Alexander, you are also member. So please, Alex, tell us a few things about you and about your activity, your thoughts about EGMA.
Well, first of all, I'm an historian based in Vienna. I'm also the leading editor-in-chief of the magazine Agora Europa, released in Germany, a magazine on philosophy and geopolitics, which this month will also be released for the first time in English. And of course, what is IGMA about? IGMA is about the popularization of the concept of multipolarity, which is, I think, one of the most important ideas right now in our times, since what we can now witness is a collapsing unipolar moment, and therefore it is highly on time to think about concepts for the future, new ideas, which will enable us to guarantee a good and prosperous future for all the different civilizations around the world.
Thank you. I'm going to show a bit the site of EGMA. So this is it. There are many articles here. European Geopolitical Multipolar Alliance. And you can find here few important ideas about us, about our activity, about the editorial team, about how you can contact us, and of course, many articles. written about the members of EGMA. So there are few articles, but we want to post more, and we are working on this. EGMA is actually a pretty new organization, but the perspectives are very high, I would say. Now, let's go into the main topic of our discussion today, the conflict in Middle East. Pierre, what do you think about the real causes, how things are going on there, and what possible outcome we could expect? And of course, many people are talking about this conflict in Middle East, but I would say there is a huge disinformation, and that's why I wanted to mark some points, some very important fundamental points in regard with this conflict, please.
Thank you, Marvin. So I start from the last bit that you mentioned. Recently, one of our members, he is an Italian professor, made a very interesting interview with an Iranian professor. And this Iranian professor, I don't like to mention names because I don't have their permission to mention their name. But this Iranian professor who lived those days in Iran when there was the uprising just before the war, gave a thorough explanation about what was going on. I'm starting from the last part just for the sake to let everyone know that the kind of media that we listen to in Europe is exactly the opposite to the media that one can listen to in Iran. When I heard this Iranian professor talk, at first I thought that he was not talking about Iran because it was so different that I hardly could catch up with what he was saying. So from one side, from the European side, we heard that the Iranian regime is killing the protesters. And from the Iranian side, this professor was explaining, and I believe that he was saying the truth, because he is this academic person that usually talks about facts, not about suppositions. He was saying that there were factions in Iran, and it was proved because in different cities, these factions made this uprising at one go. So there were phone calls from one city to another, and the uprising started exactly at the same time. These factions were making all this noise and all these damages and violence. And when the police tried to control them, they shot and killed the police. And when other protesters who were from the regime side came out to the streets, there were fights even between these factions and these protesters. And that is the reason why people died. He mentioned how many deaths with regards to the police force there were. It was enormous. We hardly heard anything about this. So, and you asked a very important question. What do I think about Iran? You know what, Marvin? I think that it is about business. I think it is about money. I think it is about a very strategic geopolitical position of Iran, because it is in a crossroad of huge business deals, as we have seen when the Strait of Hormuz is closed. The whole world is disrupted because that is one strategic seaway. So I don't think it is about what we hear on on our daily news. I don't think it's about eliminating the nuclear capabilities. I don't think it's about eliminating the ballistic missile capabilities. I think it's about money. And from whichever angle I look at this war, I confirm my supposition, because whatever happens, it is all about money. Now, a small explanation why I say it is all about money. First of all, Iran is the key. If someone takes over Iran, let's imagine there is this dream of someone who wants to take over Iran. So from Iran, it would be easy to control Russia and China economically. If not, maybe this dreamer has a bigger dream. If not, invade as well. So Iran has this very strategic situation, position, location, both financially, both physically. Obviously, there is a huge supply of crude oil, which us in Europe, we highly depend on it. And a huge supply of natural gas comes from the Strait of Hormuz as well, which we highly depend on it now, because obviously we don't have Russian gas any longer in Europe. So we depend on the Middle East. And could it be that Europe fell in a trap? First, we were cut off from Russia, and now someone wants to cut us off from the Middle East as well by closing the Strait of Hormuz. Could it be a plan putting itself together? And I suspect that if there is a plan, there is something else coming up in the very near future, because we have some gas coming from other parts of the world. And if they manage to shut this down, then Europe would really be in big trouble, in big problems.
So Pierre, do you suggest that the plan is made by US?
I can't suggest, because I only talk about things which I have real facts on. So
who made the plan?
It could be.
Could be.
What I am sure of is that the plan to cut Russian gas from Europe, that is definitely coming from the US, because we once even heard Biden say, the president say when he was in power, that this must end, it must stop. So they were always against Germany having the Nord Stream supplying the whole of Germany. And obviously the cause of this now, it is something like lately I heard, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in Germany 150,000 jobs were lost simply because of this energy prices. So jobs in industry. So yes, it could be a plan made by the US, but at the same time, there is Israel, which in my opinion has turned out to be a very powerful nation lately. I think I was underestimating Israel maybe 3, 4, or 5 years ago, but I don't underestimate Israel any longer. Israel is a very, very strong nation, and it can manipulate. It can do tricks. And I think, unfortunately, it has a very good command on Western media as well. So it can play tricks with people. So far, this is all I have to say. So I give some time to Alexander to give some.
Yes, thank you. It's a very good framework to talk. So let's start from this, Alexander. What Pierre said, that Israel is a very powerful nation. Some people say that Israel managed to influence so much United States and especially President Trump that the conflict actually started because Premier Benjamin Netanyahu had such a strong influence to Donald Trump um, to convince him to start this war. And we can see that maybe it wasn't such a good idea because things are not going in advantage of United States and Israel, I would say. What's your take on this?
Well, first of all, I have to say that Pierre Tonna is quite right when he says that Israel is a very powerful nation. Of course, if you just look at the map and then you see this tiny spot of land, which is currently occupying Palestine, you could imagine that it's quite a weak nation, very dependent on the United States of America, especially when it comes to power protection. But if you look at how Israel, how powerful it is, especially if you keep in mind the Israel lobby in the United States of America, which is obviously able to manipulate public opinion in the United States and even heavily influence presidential candidates, or the very president, Donald J. Trump, in order to do its bidding, you realize that this kind of Jewish Zionist network civilization which exists on the world is nowadays dictating US foreign policy, or at least heavily influencing it. And of course, right before this war started, there were talks in United States Congress about the so-called Epstein files, about the human trafficker with connections to the Mossad and to the CIA, Jeffrey Epstein, who also had ties even to Donald Trump. And we know that Donald Trump is mentioned in these files, and that right now only a small part of all the files has been published so far, and they are heavily redacted. And many public commentators pointed to these files and said, well, look, why is this war happening right now, right at this moment? It's simply also to distract from these files and its publications. And also just recently, I found out about a very interesting US-American author. She's called Brittany Webb, who wrote this book, A Nation Under Blackmail, about the connections between organized crime and secret services in the United States of America. And there she points out that also this connection with Zionism actually dates back right into the 30s of the last century, and that basically Robert Maxwell, the father of the complice of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, for example, was also involved in all these networks, and that Epstein himself was just the latest culmination point of this connections between the United States Secret Services, organized crime, and of course nowadays then the state of Israel. And unfortunately, these Zionist politicians in Israel, like Benjamin Netanyahu, for example, who's also trying to avoid going to jail by waging these endless wars. Of course, he's also a factor behind the recent escalation in the Middle East. But nevertheless, we should never keep out of mind that also the United States of America planned 30 years ago with their project for a new Middle East, for example, about toppling more than 7 governments in the Middle East in order to create a better atmosphere for American hegemony there. And of course, Iran has been basically on their hit list since the start of the 2000s. And yeah, the recent act of aggression committed by Israel and the United States has been just the fulfillment of this plan. But as you've pointed out, nowadays, when we look at the high losses of the United States, Iran shot down more than 20 planes or damaged them. The United States and Israel are both paying billions of dollars each day in order to continue this war. And nevertheless, they failed to achieve their aims. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. The nuclear potential of Iran has not been destroyed. Iran is still able to defend itself with rockets against the United States, Israel, and its client states in the Middle East. And it looks like that the US have overplayed their hand and are suddenly reaching the end of their hegemony because they simply underestimated the Iranians, which have been preparing for this very war since the United States attacked Iraq, they attacked Afghanistan back in the start of the 2000s, and now they finally have this conflict they prepared for more than 20 years, since they know that you cannot trust the United States, even if they present themselves as a benevolent hegemon. Of course, they are only following their own interests. They are very selfish, of course. And nowadays, we Europeans, are now in a very precarious situation, especially economically, because we were not able to prevent this conflict, and now also have to think about the future world order, a multipolar world order after American hegemony, because of course we see right now that you cannot solve every conflict with violence, that you need to come to a mutual understanding with different civilization, and that it's obviously not possible to make everyone adopt your own political system, but that there are various civilizations, different civilizations. And of course, they want maybe to live a different life than we do right now in Europe, and also a different life than the Americans in the United States. And therefore, I think it's very important to think about multipolarity and the multipolar order, because this very system of unipolarity, which started at the end of the Cold War and with the neoconservative aggression started by the Bush presidents, it's simply not sufficient any longer to give us a just order, and it has never given us a just order. But nowadays we can see in broad daylight that the system has finally failed, even for the United States themselves, and therefore we must think about a better future, also in order to prevent wars like they are currently happening in Iran and all around the Middle East.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex. So, Pierre, Alexander said few very important assets of United States that had been hit by Iran, and I would add that Iran almost destroyed, almost completely, the 27 military bases of United States in Middle East. So this is a terrible hit, and those bases were in the states that were actually complying to United States, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, and all these countries had huge military American bases, and they were destroyed. The military soldiers in those bases had to move in hotels because they were targeted so hard by Iranians. And also another thing worth to mention is that the financial system is collapsing, Western financial system, based on petrodollar, because these states in the Persian Gulf cannot export oil that usually were bought with American dollars. So this huge affair is affected, damaged, and severely. And now we can see that if United States, it will be kicked out from Persian Gulf, the international order is dramatically changing. What do you think about this?
So, me personally, I'm not impressed when I listen to news or to friends and get to know that United States lost 20 planes, lost a military base. I'm more influenced when I hear that one child died because of this war. With every war, people die. And obviously, the countries during war, those who are fighting against each other, they will have to spend a lot of money. But what is most important is we are losing lives. We are losing people. We are losing children. We are losing schools. And if our aim is to be better tomorrow and to make better those lives that will come tomorrow, we should not start any wars. This is an ideology. It is an ideology of peace. Nowadays, not all political leaders have an ideology of peace. Most of them nowadays, they have an ideology of war. And war is the only thing that will stop time on earth. Because when there is a war, one particular country, which is usually devastated, will go back 20 or 30 years. Because to reconstruct what is damaged, it will take time, it will take money. To get back the lives, it is impossible. To get back schools and universities and hospitals, it is close to impossible. Because countries at war are countries drained from money. Sometimes it is very easy to say, there is a war going on in the Middle East, yes, they are fighting against each other. But it is easy because we don't live there. Because if you live during a war, life would not be easy. Just imagine going to work, and on your way to work, you see explosions all around you, or missiles overhead, or drones flying overhead. That's not a way how people should live. We are in 2026. This is the 21st century. My goodness, didn't we learn anything from the past century? All these wars and all these people who died. So, my answer to your question is, first and foremost, what is most important for me is people's lives. And when it comes to people's lives, what is most important for me? It is the children first, us adults later. But children must be protected first. So all those leaders who hurt children, definitely, I am not going to be on their side. Definitely. Secondly, each and every war drains money, not only from the countries concerned, but even from the neighbors. And the reason is very simple. Because nowadays, goods pass from one country to another. When goods stop flowing, business stops, merchandise stops, supply chain is broken. And when a supply chain is broken, the rest comes down with it, because our economy, each and every country in the world, depends on a supply chain. Whatever we produce and whatever we do depends on our supplies. So, secondly, and very importantly, economically, this supply chain disrupts all the financial systems of the other countries that are neighboring or maybe even not neighboring the war. Thirdly, what I also can pinpoint is that countries like United States during this war have not only lost money because they lost their weaponry, their planes, their munitions, their bases, the soldiers in their army lost their lives as well. But now we are seeing inflation and high prices in many regions in the United States as well, nearly in all regions in the United States. So people, the Americans back at home, they are paying the price as well. If I am not mistaken, yesterday their fuel went up to $4, which is unacceptable in the United States, because in the coming months, United States is kind of in a holiday mode. People take their cars, their caravans, and they travel. The United States is a big country, many beautiful places, and people travel. But having fuel at $4, people, they are going to be hurt as well. So this inflation in the United States is another, obviously, consequence of this war. But as well, products imported from United States will have a higher price. So this is a never-ending story, Marvin, because whatever happens, each and every part of the world is going to be hit. The closer you are to the war zone, the harder you will be hit. And the more you depend on the supplies coming from this war zone, the more you are going to be hit. At the same time, one must also take into consideration that huge changes have been made in Venezuela as well. And this is not years ago, this is a few weeks ago. So huge changes have been made in Venezuela again. And I'm not sure if this is a coincidence, but hardly a coincidence. But Venezuela is one of the world's largest oil reserves that exist. So the Middle East is a huge oil reserve. Venezuela is a huge oil reserve, and they supply the whole world. So I'm not sure if it's a coincidence, but I don't believe it is. But these two countries, they were hit at the same time. Probably there is more to come, because the plan is much bigger than this, I believe. But we will have to wait to see. What I wish is that us people, the common citizens, take in whatever we can from media, from different countries, from different headquarters, from different routes. Talk to friends, talk to people living in Iran, and try to assemble your own news. Try to be wittier than you was before. You don't need to be very intelligent to understand what other people have to say, because everyone can tell his own story in a few minutes. And if the person whom you are talking to is trustworthy, then you can take his words as the best news you can have, because he would be the person living in the region of war. So and I will close off with this. My suggestion is this: let us get to know exactly what is happening, but through facts. And when someone or some media says something, ask yourself, where are the facts? Where is the proof of what they are saying? So when we hear, for example, because this is very, very, very common, I hear it on news nearly every week, a cyber attack on some European institution, and then at the end of the line they say it was coming from Russia. So these cyber attacks, they are always coming from Russia. And who is guilty? It is the Russian president. So the Russian president is sitting down, making cyber attacks all day, because it is always coming from him. And we heard this, I don't know how many times, I don't count them, but over 100 times. So someone like me asks himself a question. Prove it. Give me proof. Don't just give me a caption, one sentence, it is coming from Russia. Give me proof. How did you reach this result? If you give me proof, yes, then I will believe. But otherwise, I am sorry, I will hear, but I won't listen. And I wish that everyone does the same. Because what is going on in the world right now, it is all because of false media attacking us from morning till night. Whatever we hear on media, it is all an agenda which is planned for the benefit of someone. Obviously, this someone, today, I got to know whom it might be, but I don't have proof, so I won't mention any names. But it is always to the benefit of someone who is obviously one of the elites around us. Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you, Pierre. Actually, we could extend this topic maybe in our next intervention, Pierre. Yes, and we could connect with the influence of media in Romania because we had some events in December 2024, and it's worth to mention this fact because there is a threat to expand this pattern to all Europe and even more. But going back to Alexander, I would like to connect with what Pierre said that regarding the children and the lives that are lost. We can see that in the first day of conflict, there were killed almost 170 children in Minab school in Iran, and it was definitely a deliberate attack, because in the beginning the Americans said it was just happened, it's just an error, but no, there were 3 missiles that went there with 40 minutes distance. First they killed the children, then they killed the parents, then they killed the first aid personnel. 3 missiles. And Alex, I want to ask you something more specific regarding the alliances that are formed in, there is an echo, alliances that are formed now in the world, because we can see that against Israel and United States entered Lebanon, Houthi, and Yemen. And of course, we know that Russians and Chinese are near Iran and all the BRICS alliance, more or less, because we can see, for instance, for India, in case of India, a kind of ambivalent approach. And on the other side, we can see in the usual camp of United States and Israel that there are some nuances. For instance, Spain closed the airspace for American aircrafts. Also, France and who else? Italy, yeah. Premier Giorgia Meloni said she will not open the space of Italy for American planes. So how do you see, Alex, the forming of alliances? Because we were used to see the American hegemon and it was the unipolar order. Most of the states were, after 1991, when the Soviet Union dismantled, it was the unipolar order, and now the things are more complicated. There are more poles of power. So what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think, of course, it's a very negative development that we have this war right now. And Pierre mentioned it, you've mentioned it, that in the very first day of the war, deliberately, the United States and Israel killed more than 170 schoolgirls who, of course, were not part of this conflict as combatants and couldn't have been. And we have also seen similar scenes in Lebanon, which was right now also attacked by Israel in order to create this vision of greater Israel, which is also one of the many reasons why the Western camp started this war. Of course, this is very negative. But of course, as you said before, we can also see more positive developments. We can see that unlike in 1999, for example, when Yugoslavia stood on its own, when the United States did the same to the Serbs and to Yugoslavs, what they are now doing to the Iranians, they were basically completely alone, and only later in the conflict the Russians intervened in order to protect the Serbs in Kosovo. But this was at the very end of the conflict. Basically, they were on their own. But in this conflict right now, from the very start, both Russia and China helped Iran in order to defend itself, as we've also heard from the United States of America. And we can see, and I think this is very positive for us Europeans, that governments like the Spanish government, who, for example, more than 20 years back in the past, they actually supported the United States invasion of Iraq. But now, 20 years later, they said, no, we no longer will take part in this aggression. We are not allowing the United States any longer to use our territory as basis for this criminal conflict. And also other European states joined in. And I think this is a very positive sign for the development of multipolarity, because on the one hand, you can see that Iran is not on its own. There are powers like Russia and like China who are helping Iran in order to defend itself against this kind of aggression, and also in order to give the Iranian people the means to deter the United States and Israel from further harming them, which would not be possible in this dimension without, for example, Chinese satellite systems and Russian intelligence data, what they're doing right now. And I think, yeah, the most positive signal for us Europeans is that there are at least some governments who say, no, we will no longer take part in this aggression, and show that Europe could actually take another part in this conflict, far away from supporting the United States of America, and maybe calling for peace, and for supporting Iran, at least in a humanitarian way. So in order that all these civilians who got hurt, of course, the most by these bombardments, by these embargoes and everything, that at least some of them, of course, can be saved in this process. And I guess this is also somehow the hint for what multipolarity can be very good, and that is that you can defend yourself against aggression. If you have, for example, a very aggressive power which is intervening in your region, like right now at the moment, the United States of America, there could several powers join you in the defense of your country, and help you, intervene also for you on the diplomatic stage in order to somehow at least try to localize and minimize this conflict, and of course prevent it from escalating into even World War III. And this would be very important on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, it would also be very important to go away and leave back behind this logic of continuous aggression, of hegemonic dominance of one power over the rest of the world, of one civilization over all the other civilizations. Since, of course, humanity is very diverse. We have different civilizations, we have different, of course, religions on the world, like Christianity, Islam, and others, and therefore also different ways of life. And if you see what is happening right now in the United States of America, if you saw what is actually written in those Epstein files about, of course, abuse of children, even talks about, of course, we don't know what really happened, but we have at least some eyewitness talking about cannibalism and other really evil things. I think it should be possible for every people on this planet to make a choice if they actually want to emulate this Western model, which in the past 30 years, for example, in the Middle East led to wars, to starvation, to economic crisis, to the breakdown of statehood. If people actually want to join this model of development, or if they want to develop on their own. And we could see, for example, in Latin America, countries like Venezuela, who also wanted to adopt this independent approach and to adopt their own way of life, their own lifestyle. But unfortunately, then the United States as a hegemon decided, no, the Venezuelans are not allowed to do this. And therefore, we can see that it is very important for such countries who are choosing their own way of life to be able to defend themselves. Also, if we are talking about Europe, for example, just at the start of the year, we had the United States of America talking, for example, about taking over Greenland, like it's some kind of real estate in a New York real estate deal, and you take this side of the street, I take that side of the street. But of course, these are countries, there are people living inside them. And also these people should have a say in how their future will play out and not be occupied by some kind of gigantic hegemonic state or be subdued to the interests of big international corporations like Palantir, for example. We talked about the bombing of the school in the very beginning, and it's this company run by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, who's actually since the days of 9/11 in the United States about the privatization of the surveillance state. And not only that, they are also using AI models for leading wars. And we had catastrophic results of this so-called AI warfare, for example, in Gaza, when thousands of civilians were declared combatants by these AI systems. And now, at the start of the war in Iran, we also had these AI systems deliberately targeting civilian buildings and therefore killing civilians in the thousands. And these are all developments which are basically dictated by the West, and where the rest of the world doesn't have a say. And where, for example, also we Europeans are not as well informed as possible about these negative developments of multinational corporation using AI models in order to weaponize our personal data, for example. And therefore, multipolarity is so important because on the one hand, it enables yourself to defend your own rights, your own people, your own children against malevolent actors from the outside in order to join forces with other civilizations in defending yourself on the one hand. And on the other hand, of course, to choose a different course, to choose, for example, peace and cooperation over a clash of civilizations, over warfare. And this is, I think, nowadays more important than ever, because we are right now sleepwalking into a giant global conflict. We are basically sleepwalking into World War III. We have seen, for example, the war for Ukraine, where the Europeans wanted to deliver more and more weapons in order to fuel the conflict, instead of saying, okay, we have this conflict here right now, let's talk about a solution, let's talk about a possible peaceful solution, about a stable, peaceful order in Europe. But of course, then you have also actors from the outside who say, no, we don't want peace, because peace doesn't mean profit for our armament industries. It doesn't mean profit for Raytheon, for Palantir and for other corporations who are actually benefiting from this carnage, from the murder of innocent civilians. And therefore, it's so important to further develop this idea of multipolarity and also to make it more popular, because when you have different civilizations on the planet and different modes of society, and even the idea of cooperation between different civilizations, about cooperation between Christians in Europe and Muslims in the Middle East, in Iran, and not this idea of steady conflict, because you don't have necessarily to be in a steady conflict with someone who is different to you, who has a different identity. You can also try to understand each other and to make a cooperation, for example, because if we are following this very model of steady conflict, of never-ending wars, which we have since the end of the Cold War. We talked about Yugoslavia, we talked about Iraq, Afghanistan, we can also talk about Libya. Basically, this whole space has been thrown into a never-ending quagmire, into a never-ending war. And of course, it's not the common people who are profiting from these wars, from these never-ending conflicts, but it's only a tiny percentage of elites. And therefore, as it's a popular saying in Germany and Austria, we have to change the elites in power before the elites in power are able to exchange the peoples. And I'm not only talking about mass immigration, I'm also talking about the dangers of AI, of automation, for example. And of course, this also affects people all around the world. And right now, we have this gigantic catastrophe in the Middle East, and we don't know when the United States will be willing to end this. We can only guess right now at the moment, but right now it would be more important than ever that there is a strong united voice in Europe for peace, a strong united voice for multipolarity, and a strong united voice for ending these conflicts. And like Spain have shown, like Italy has shown, and also like France has shown, of course this is possible. If you don't want to participate in a war, if you don't want to kill innocent civilians, you can simply stop that, or you can even refrain from taking part in it. You only have to want to stop that. You have to want to refrain from taking part in war, and instead take the party of peace. And yeah, right now in the Middle East, it would be nowadays more important than ever that Europe, for example, supports humanitarian efforts to support the war-torn countries in the Middle East, to support Iran in this very dangerous situation on the one hand. And finally, it would be very important that Europe takes a confrontative position towards the warmongers in Washington, in Tel Aviv, and says, stop this. We don't want these wars anymore. We want peace. So please end this. We Europeans, we are out of this conflict. So you also have to end this conflict. I think if we could at least organize a strong European voice for peace, this would be a very important and first step in the direction of a multipolar order, since also we Europeans ourselves have to adopt this position of peace, of multipolarity, against this hegemonic course of never-ending wars around the planet.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I remember that when this conflict in Iran was at the beginning, it was an interview of Pete Hegseth, there is an echo, the Secretary of War in United States, and he said, if we are not going to attack Iran now, in 1 year it will be too late. And I think this statement is very important and reflects the huge shifting that is happening now in the world, because the rising powers, Russia and China and all the other members of BRICS, become stronger and stronger. And United States and Israel are losing power, and also European Union as an entity, or how it was during Biden administration, it was an ally, close ally with NATO, with United States. And I think this conflicts in Ukraine and now in Iran reflects very closely that the unipolar order is dying, and they don't want to cede power. They want to keep it, but it is impossible. And with this conflict in Iran, we can see exactly how the new alliances become stronger than unipolarity. And I think, and we wrote some articles on EGMA on our site, European Geopolitical Multipolarity Alliance. And we think that it is very important that people need to understand what is actually means international order, what means unipolarity, what means multipolarity. And in few words, unipolarity means when in the international stage it is one single superpower, and that was United States until recently. But multipolarity is when you have at least three superpowers, and now we really have three superpowers. Beyond the United States, there are Russian Federation and China. There are really superpowers, and unipolarity requires the influence of the hegemon that actually dictate the international order to all the other states. In a unipolar order, there is only one superpower and no major power, and only medium powers. But now we don't have this configuration of power because we already have three superpowers, and there are also multiple major powers. And in multipolarity, we have sovereign states, not hegemonic states, and the relationship are based on equality and to respect sovereignty. And this is the new international order that we are going into. And we getting close to the end of our show. Pierre, please tell us, you started to tell about the influence of media, and let's correlate this influence with the new society that emerged in multipolar order. How should media be? And of course, we can make a connection with the situation in Romania, but I can tell you, because I am Romanian, the cancellation of elections, it was not because of media firsthand. It was because of political calculation, because they, when I say they, I mean the mafia power that had the power and wanted to keep it, and they made actually a coup d'etat, and they blame on Russia, but without any proof. It was just a pretext. It was not TikTok, it was not Russia or Facebook or anything. It was their simple calculation. We cannot let Călin Georgescu, the elect president of Romania, and we need to find a pretext. But however, let's talk about the influence of media here.
So, as you have very well explained, we are living during a fierce time. I call it fierce because we have changed our geopolitical system completely from what we had, let's say, a decade ago. At the moment, we are completely different. And we are in this state simply because, as you have very well explained, we have three superpowers. We have the United States, we have Russia, and we have China. And these three superpowers, they cannot be ruled by each other. So United States cannot rule China or Russia because they have the same power. Russia and China emerged gradually, slowly, but surely. And Russia has proved its superpower during this war. One must bear in mind that Russia was not fighting against Ukraine. The special military operation was obviously against half of the world, as everyone knows. So, coming back to China, what China has today is obviously very much even to what the United States has militarily. United States remains in power simply because of a system that was created and adapted for the dollar, that was used and is still used, largely used by many states to make payments. It was the only currency that emerged during the past decades as the best currency to do trade. Nowadays, it is still powerful, it is still strong, but as we all know, for the dollar to be strong, there has to be a big demand for the dollar. So, in a few words, just to give a small explanation, if at the moment the price of oil is very high, and countries such as European countries, they need to purchase oil with the dollar. So instead of paying $50 a barrel, now they have to pay $100 a barrel. So the demand for the dollar is higher. So as we can see economically at the moment, the dollar is getting stronger against other currencies. But only because payments are made through the dollar. Now we have experienced with some big BRICS countries, energy being paid by yuan, which is obviously a new competition for the dollar. I believe that in time, this competition will grow bigger and bigger because there might be better prices with different currencies, which already exist, and I believe that in the future will benefit more countries. And apart from that, one must also mention that in a multipolar world, the fundamentals of a multipolar world are respect and equality. If one does not respect his neighbor, he can't be a part of a multipolar world, definitely. We have to start from respect. So we must, first of all, look at each other and believe that we are equal, not superior or not inferior. So we have to believe that we are equal. So we must have the same say, the same weight politically. So that is first and foremost. Secondly, which is very important in order for our societies to live in peace. Secondly, we, apart from respect and equality, we must have the same rule of law. So as we know today, we are supposed to have United Nations leading the whole globe, but in fact the resolutions register that the United Nations aren't simply working. So resolutions we have, but pragmatism no, most of the times. So we must have a basic rule of law, which all countries must abide, by which all countries must abide. We must be equal not only politically, but we must be equal and respectful religiously. So we must accept other religions. One of the things which, for example, I couldn't understand during the Ukraine war in the beginning was, wait a second, not during the war, before the war started. I could not understand why people in Donbass were being oppressed. So Ukrainians being oppressed by Ukrainians about their language and religion. I couldn't understand this because, as far as I know, in Europe, for example, let's say in Belgium, you have people talking in French, in Dutch, in German. They don't shoot each other, they don't kill each other, they don't oppress each other, they live together in peace. So how come in Ukraine, the people of one part of Ukraine, they shoot and kill the people of another part in Ukraine? I couldn't really understand this until friends of mine living there gave me a good explanation. So if there was respect, as I am saying now, if there was respect, if there was this mentality of us being equal, there wouldn't have been problems. If all religions are equal and if religions respect each other, there wouldn't be problems. And multipolarity, after all, it's not only beneficial for having good economic world. It's not about being rich. It's about living in harmony and peace, first and foremost, for the good of ourselves and for the benefit of those who need to live in the future. So Marvin, I think it's time that we start closing off. So my last few words are these. I believe in a multipolar world. We are not sure and we do not know exactly how this multipolar world will work out and how it will emerge. With regards to superpowers, as you have said and explained perfectly, we have 3 at the moment. There might be more in the future, who knows, but not in the close future, definitely. So yes, I believe in a multipolar world. I believe in peace and harmony coming from respect from one country to another. So mutual respect. And I also believe that the leaders, our leaders and other leaders of each and every state, they must listen with wide open ears to what their citizens have to say. And the citizens, they must bear in mind that once they go to vote in an election, once they vote to their leader, there is no way back. So make sure that you make the best decision, because if your leader is not good in finance and you start losing 100 jobs a day in industry, and economically your country wouldn't be doing so well, so your national health system would start failing, your educational system would start failing. If that kind of leader is not good, don't vote for him. That's all. Choose the best. So that's my theory. Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Of course, this would be the logical modality our leaders should think, but unfortunately, we know that many of them are only puppets. They are not acting with their consciousness. Maybe they don't have any consciousness. It's a kind of joke, but they are subjected to blackmail by others entity that many times are acting behind the scene. So we don't know exactly who are forcing Macron, Starmer, Merz, and so on. So, Alexander, please tell us few words, few remarks in the ending of our show, which is your opinion regarding what kind of international order will come. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think that right now we are witnessing the final point of transitioning from the collapsing unipolar world to a new multipolar order. Since right now we can see obviously that the United States and the West have overplayed their hands, and that obviously Iran is able to defend itself together with the other multipolar powers against these attacks. So it seems that there are not only the United States, Russia, China, India, but maybe in the future there will be finally also an Islamic power bloc organized around Iran, which is able to fend off these attacks and also become a pole of a multipolar world. But of course, as Pierre has said before, we are just witnessing the emergence of this new multipolar order, but we cannot say right now how it is going to play out, simply because this is a part of the future. And when it comes to the future, we also have to take our destiny in our own hands. We have to build this future. We are not just passive spectators or consumers who are just witnessing the future being decided by others, but also we as ordinary people have a say, as intellectuals, as family fathers, as political activists. We all can play a role in this process. We can decide if, for example, Europe will join as another independent pole in this multipolar world, or if Europe will be just some kind of economically devastated backwater still controlled by the United States of America. And we can change this very destiny and this course of events in the future. It's about us if we will be part of this multipolar world, or if we will be just be passive spectators who don't have a say in the future things to come. So therefore, I can only motivate all our viewers to join this process of multipolarity, to think about our own future, to become, as Antonio Gramsci has also put it, intellectuals, to become conscious participants in the struggle for the future. Because right now we are witnessing this dying world of unipolarity, and the future is still about to be born. So I think we should not be passive. I think we should directly participate in these events, because of course they are about the future of Europe. They are about our future, the future of our children, the future of the different European peoples, the people of Austria, of Romania, of Malta, of France, of Germany. And we all have to take part in the struggle. And of course, we want a peaceful world. So therefore, we have to oppose these warmongers. And I can only, basically make a call to action in order to also join intellectual organizations, join think tanks, and also participate in creating new ideas and concepts in order to make this future possible. And I think EGMA is one example of such think tanks. I can also recommend, for example, the newspaper, the magazine I'm creating together with some friends in Germany called Agora Europa, which is also now released in English, which also tries to take a European position in this multipolar world. And I can also only motivate, as said before, all our viewers to take part in this conscious process, and also to become intellectuals, take part in this discussion, make up your own ideas, or help others develop their ideas, so that in the future also Europe will be no longer just a spectator, but that also we can be an actor in this upcoming multipolar world, and that we can finally break out of this circle, this vicious circle of death, destruction, refugee crises, economic crises, demographic crises, the breakdown of statehood, and finally create a lasting, peaceful order of cooperation, of respect towards each other, of respecting other identities and civilizations, but also about respecting your own identity, your own civilization, your own religion, and let not others disrespect it, because as Pierre Tonna said before, without respect for each other, we cannot create a stable order and a common future. And yeah, I think if you look at this history of Western universalism of the last 30 years, of neoconservative interventions, of liberalist internationalism, where you dictate other people how they should vote, like in Romania, if you dictate other people how they should live, like also unfortunately the Europeans did in Iraq, in Libya, and now how the United States and Israel are trying to dictate the Iranians how they should live, how they did it with Venezuela. I think we simply have to leave these old ways behind and adopt another strategy of respect. We have to adopt another way of life. We have to reclaim our own history and identity, and we have to leave back behind this vicious circle of invade the world and invite the world, and this is only possible with multipolarity.
Thank you very much, Alexander Markovics, and thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a pleasure to talk with you, and I think it's very useful to cross our ideas. We are from different countries, and actually this is the idea of our group, formed with members from many countries. Our group meaning EGMA, European Geopolitical Multipolarity Alliance. And of course, we can understand better that we have the same ideals, the same objectives to live in a world with sovereign countries where the will of the people are respected, not like in a hegemonic system where there is a superpower that dictates to all the others, and media and human rights and everything else are only pretexts, are only facade. They are not really respected. So we have the chance to step in another era. And I think what we see with this resetting of international relations on the background of these conflicts in Ukraine and Iran, we can see very concretely that indeed the international order is reshaping, and we are entering in the multipolar world. So thank you again, Pierre Tonna, Alexander Markovics, and I thank very much to our audience. We end here. Goodbye. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.